Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fan. Good morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. It is Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021. I first want to say happy birthday to my sister, my middle sister, Nakia Hills. She's probably not on. She's probably asleep, but y'all let her know I said happy birthday to her. My mother's on. Ma, let her know. We are gathering this morning. We gathered last evening. I held space in reference to a lot that's going on in our community, transitions of loved ones. A lot from all of it to us is tragedy, some from violence, some from domestic violence, some from horrific circumstances. And also we lost a pillar within our community. And someone did call me last night and said, James, you're going to get in trouble because you're naming names. And there have been others that have transitioned as well. So I want to be sensitive to that and say that all life or all transition impacts those of us that are here remaining. And so it's no slight to anyone that has suffered from the same demise, but also it's just, I felt compelled seeing what was on my timeline in reference to Deja, as well as Allah, and then also Sherelle yesterday. And some of the topics that have come up around just, death and trauma period have been based in the fact that it's an impact on our mental health. And also in some circumstances, we can definitely point and ask questions around what was the mental health status of the individuals, and how can we going forward ensure in our community we understand that mental health is vitally important. I put a post up earlier that basically said, and specifically we're talking about men and Black men today in mental health, and also we're naming protecting Black women, that, our mental health is just as important as our physical fitness. And men are known stereotypically to be into their bodies and all muscular. I don't have that testimony. But we're going to bring some brothers into the room to have a very real, it might be a Java After Dark cadence to it, but we're going to have a real conversation about Black men and mental health contextually, historically, proactively, and some next steps that we can take, and just real. So it's going to be a real conversation. Both of these men are no stranger to the Java Cafe. They have been in here before, and both of them are well-known mental health advocates. And so I'm getting ready to bring them in the room on screen, and we are talking with Carlos Henriquez and also Kurt Fauston in the room with us this morning rather. So gentlemen, good morning. Good to see you both in the room. It's interesting in the circumstances, and thank both of you for the consenting to the last minute ask. But good morning to both of you. Carlos, we'll start with you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing okay. Good morning to you, and I appreciate you creating the space for us to talk about men and mental health and community. And it's good to see you too, Kurt. I'm a big, as you know, I'm a follower of your work and appreciative of the work you do in community as well.
He is definitely doing great work. And I'll say a young man, it's going to make Carlos and I sound old today, but Kurt, we appreciate you. Kurt, greet the people. And I'm going to go into just some context with you all in just a couple of seconds.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be here for this conversation. I think it's needed. It's unfortunate, but it's very much needed. And of course, Carlos, you already know I've been a huge fan of your work. And thank you, James, for actually putting this together in such a quick. It wasn't like even was even like delayed from what you did last night to what you're doing this morning. I think it speaks volumes in regards to your leadership.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, man. I want to jump right in with both of you. And you know, I use this model of one word, and we all move in the mental health space. And we're talking in reference to Black men and mental health. And what I emailed both of you and asked was, what is it in one word? What is it that we need to know when it comes to our mental health status? As Black men, if you were to describe the either status of it or I don't want to put words in your mouth, Carlos, what would the status of Black men in our mental health, if you were to use one word right now where we are, what would that word be?
For the status, man, I thought I studied for this question and now I'm all off.
I may have framed it differently here. I'm so sorry about that, sir.
I guess I'm kind of stuck in what I was thinking about. I guess I need a hyphen to make it happen too. I think the main thing that we should focus on when we're thinking about our status as individuals is self-control. For me, that's where mental health begins and ends. We try to exert a lot of control over the things we do in our life, but self-control would be the one thing that I think we should focus on. Okay, and we're going to come back and ask you for context, Kurt. What would be one word, a couple of words that you would use in reference to our status, our mental health status as Black men?
Tragic. You look at all the numbers, look at all the statistics, look at exactly where we're at as a whole community in regards to Black men. And it's not even referencing the recent murders that obviously that kind of brought this to light. But no, we've been in a tragic state.
And so, Carlos, based on what Kurt said, and I told you we sort of free flow from there, you said self-care, self-control. Self-control. And so in reference to what Kurt said, in reference to what you said, can you tie those together, self-control, and he used the word tragic?
Yeah. If I quote a great Black writer, I think about James Baldwin's quote about to be a Negro in America and being able and having to suppress such a rage. I think, our tragedy is well documented in a lot of areas, and trying to figure out how to maintain a sense of healthiness while being oppressed, while dealing with all these things that happen in our lives. Really puts us in kind of a conundrum. And until we start to talk about it and dialogue and figure out how to share tools, it leaves us in this tragic. We're always responding to tragedy upon tragedy and oppression. And it's just a heavy system. And this system wears Black men down, not to excuse any bad behaviors, but it has a profound effect on your mind and your body and your being, and therefore the community at large.
Kurt, would you add to that as far as so I'll switch it back to you. You said tragic. Carlos said self-control. Tie them together from your perspective.
Tragic and self-control tied it into our perspective. If we're thinking about it right now, for a lot of Black men, if we look at a lot of the main stressors that we're facing, is usually stresses that our whole entire community are facing. It is race and racism, jobs and careers, money, finances, relationships, and family, health and illnesses. Like right now in general, when we're talking about Black men, I think 1 out of 5 of them, or they're 20% more likely to develop a mental illness in their lifetime in comparison to white counterparts. Once again, they're 20% more likely to develop a mental health illness in comparison to the white counterparts. We don't have right now a system, we don't have a society that helps promote us to really attack certain stigmas. We don't have a system in a society and right now a community that helps promote education in regards to mental health. We're doing it now, of course, but we don't have a system in society that really helps promote mental health and being in control of it. We don't have a system in society that really helps promote or advocates for us to even have more of these type of conversations where it's 3 Black men just having open and vulnerable conversations, right? We don't have a system in society that really helps promote us even growing up to be anything else but an entertainer or an athlete. I mean, I could go in depth and I could go further about this, but that's why I say it's in a tragic state. Right now, we are the results of a failed system. We're the results of a failed society. We're the results of, honestly, a lot of different broken homes. And Black men is just in combination. We just are a walking time bomb in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. It's tragic. It's really a tragedy because Black women feel it. Our kids feel it. The next generation feels it. Society feels it. Like, I could go all day about this.
So based on what you said, Kurt, when you talk about some things that's starting at home, Mike Massey is on it. He's asking, who's teaching young men the proper codes? Codes lead to keys. Keys unlock things. Who's teaching the codes? Carlos, you have often referenced, and as many times that I can give you the opportunity to talk about, from the child skinning their knee. And so let's go a little bit there and where you can put them together. Talk a little bit about your mental health journey, because Kurt mentioned vulnerability. And I think the examples and the conversations of men watching who may see this or later, they see that brothers like us believe in keeping our mental wellness. And Kurt talked about developing mental illness. And so, Carlos, I'm sorry. Can you, from Mike's statement, a little bit of your mental health journey and how you've sort of for lack of better words, code switched?
Yeah, I think, I build with Brother Mike all the time, a well-respected brother in the community as well. And I believe he's correct. I believe one of the things that's missing in our society, in our communities, is real coming of age. We don't recognize the development of, if we're speaking about men, we don't recognize the emotional and mental development of boyhood to manhood, right? And it's one of the things that I learned becoming a mentor a long time ago, is that, we are pre-programmed to some degree. I mean, as humans, we come into the world looking for certain things, oxygen, water, food, and nourishment. But a lot of the stuff that comes beyond that are learned behaviors. And you've heard me, like you said, you've heard me quote several times about the difference between when a boy falls and a girl falls on the ground and hurts themselves. A girl is allowed to express her emotions. A boy is taught to suppress his, for the most part. Be a man, toughen up, don't cry. And so, you start to code and learn. It's a learned behavior. Now, that's just about your emotions, right? So you're starting to bottle that up at 5. And then in the society, whether you're a Black man, whether you're whatever color man you are, we have grown up there's always been violence and violence used as a tool. And it's taught to men as something that's okay to use as a tool. The bigger men, the strong survive, the weak, there's all kinds of cliches. There's things that demean women. It becomes a belief system. And I hope, I think Kurt as a coach will, I've probably heard this before as well. Once you have formed a belief system, it's hard to undo that, especially if it's unconscious to you. And the things about beliefs is that those things shape your thoughts, and your thoughts then shape your actions, and your actions then repeatedly become your habits, and now your habits become your character, and that's who you are. So if you're unconscious to these things, which many of us are, and that's no slight. I mean, a lot of us take on our parents' religion. A lot of us take on our parents' habits and sayings. A lot of us take on their political party, and we do these things subconsciously. And so until we move into, like what Mike said, until we start to have agreements between men in a community about what we're going to teach boys, what we're going to teach girls, and how we're going to develop them, how we're going to honor their transition from child to adult, until we start to define those for ourselves in a conscious way, and shape our own culture and create our own culture, we'll continue to live a culture that was given to us and warped by those that, brought us here and oppressed us hundreds of years ago. And so we have to undo some of that, unlearn some of our habits, and create new ones for ourselves.
And so, Carlos, thank you, because I want to pivot to Kurt, and we'll do a separate whole section about your mental health journey, because I won't presume that for many of us that are here in this space, we're kind of familiar, and I want to start talking about like next steps. And so we are going to talk about some solutions and approaches for us to start dealing with this and not just naming it. So, Carlos, we're going to go back and let you just do that whole separately. So, Kurt, I seen you there going back and forth, and I know what that means.
You ready to jump in?
In reference to what Carlos just said, and you talked about a ticking time bomb. And I'll be honest, I know somebody listening right now, he shouldn't say that about us. That's just, perpetuating what, they say about us or whatever. But let's have a real conversation. Everything that Carlos talked about from childhood, there's a little bit of an age difference here. Can you speak to sort of that progression of the culture that we need to change? Let me take it here. What we need to drop out of. I mean, sure.
You know what I like? And I love this conversation. It really does mean a lot. And I'm an old man. Don't let the non-beard fool you. I'm an old man myself. But I'm now believing, and I've been thinking about this for a while. I think some of the biggest issues is that we don't have enough good men and women in position of power, in a position of leadership. A lot of the good men I know are too quiet. A lot of the good men that I know are not taking up positions where their voice is going to be heard over the masses. Or
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? And I don't do this often, but based on the context of what you said and what Rena just wrote, that leadership role, what's your thought there based on and let's have a real conversation about this part here and then go ahead there. But I saw that and what you were saying and I had to chime in. Sorry.
Yeah, it is that leadership role, because Carlos said something's great. And what up to Mike? Like he said, like, who's going to be the ones teaching? First, we have to be aware of the problem. Another part, we have to then put ourselves in a position where we can then teach or provide guidance or provide changes in policy, whether it's in the school system, from community, regardless. Like, we have to take upon those roles, right? But when I think earlier I was saying, when we're too busy dealing with financial issues, when we're too busy dealing with jobs and careers, relationships and families, mental health and illnesses, we then place ourselves in an isolated position and just look for ourselves, or maybe just look for our immediate family. So we're not even thinking about the bigger picture until it touches our home. And they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? Or why isn't this happening? We're in such one of the biggest issues I'm seeing in our community is that we're so isolated. We're so isolated until something like a murder touches the community. It's like, oh my gosh, what do we need to do? But then tomorrow or next week, we go back into the isolated position. And as you already know, isolation is an ingredient to depression. And depression is a mental health issue. We're so isolated when we think we're by ourselves with the issues and problems that we're facing. When we're only handling it by ourselves, we're not shouldering the load. We're not leaning upon each other. I'm not leaning upon Carlos' knowledge and expertise and leadership abilities. I'm not leaning upon your advice and expertise. I'm not doing it. I'm just doing it all myself. And then what happens? Eventually, I will break down mentally. I will break down emotionally. And then, like Carlos also said, that also gets passed down to our kids. One thing when you just learn about trauma and you learn about genetic trauma, you look at what happened with slavery. I don't even have to go all the way back, but if you look at what happened with slavery, after slavery happened, I don't remember them providing any mental health therapists. I don't remember them providing any coaching and counseling, but I do remember trauma continuing. In the 1950s, the 40s, the 30s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. I remember trauma continuing. But I don't remember us having any type of mental health therapist. I don't remember any type of mental health services. I don't remember any type of mental health coaches really going in our community. That genetically does something to our DNA code. That has done something, realigned the way we communicate, our attitude, how we view ourselves, the negative self-talk we have. Like, some of that, like Carlos said, is already programmed within us. So some of the battles we are facing are not even our battles. I'm battling some of my grandparents, my granddaddy, my grandmama's issues, and I'm battling it amongst my own battles. It's a war amongst the wars, so it's crazy. And if we consistently stay in an isolated state, we're going to consistently break down like we have been. So that's why I'm really big on more men and women, of course. We need good ones, need to take position of power, position of leadership. We need to step up. That's why I hit you up the other day. Like, hey, do you think I should collaborate with this? Because I'm trying to humble myself and be like, how do I provide? It's about the impact. I'm in love with the impact.
That part is it there. And my brother's in the room. I just need to acknowledge him. What's up, Mo? So Carlos, based on what Kurt just said about the culture, and I don't think I've ever heard the term genetic trauma. But I love that. How do we begin? And even an example here in shifting the conversation. How do we begin? Carlos, what was the part for you? You've always been an advocate. But what was the part for you that got you on the road to, one, address things, two, do the work that you often talk about, and then three, I'll save the other part for last. What got you on the road, Carlos?
I mean, if I narrow it down, it'd be a couple of things. I became a mentor probably about a decade and a half, almost 2 decades ago. And so I started to see myself through my younger friends and younger people in my community. And then I realized that in helping others, I was taking on a lot of their trauma as well and starting to feel it heavily. And of course, in typical fashion, it was a Black woman that reached out to me and said, listen, you need to be aware of this and careful of this. And if you need therapy, I'm here for you. That Black woman just happened to be my mother and my shero. And I rejected it at the time because I had that stigma. I didn't therapy. What do I need a therapy for at 25 years old? But here I am mentoring, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. So what I learned through that process and continue to learn is that you can't teach without being a learner, and they go hand in hand. I can't mentor somebody and not be getting mentored from somebody else. And knowing as I started to learn more about myself and why I do the things that I do, why I've done the things that I've done, and just the things that trigger you or make you happy, the more you become aware of yourself, the more self-control you have. And I think in a world where you're being attacked from all sides, you naturally want to control everything from the outside. But the only thing you can really control in this world is yourself, your emotions, your feelings, your actions, the impact that you have on others. So learning how to take that power and seed it inside of me rather than look for it outside of me really put me on a different path. And then when I listen to Kurt and I think about our strategy in terms of how we fight this fight, I mean, the trauma, the generational trauma, like the lion cub knows that the hyena is the enemy. The cat is born into the world knowing to be careful of the dog. The mouse is already scared of the snake because they have thousands of years of being chased by each other and threatened by each other. So it's no different for humans. We get this coding, and until we understand it and how, like Kurt said, how it makes us act, how it makes us treat an elder, how it makes us treat a younger person, whether we're respectful or disrespectful. All these things are typically pre-programmed. And until you understand it for your individual self, you really don't have control over it to change it for yourself or anybody else. So that's what really got me on my journey of like self-discovery and trying to figure out what's going to make me a better person day in and day out. And it's a journey that I love. Like Kurt said, I love the impact that it has on me. And I love, therefore, the impact that I can have on others and just empowering them to take control of themselves.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm going to come back and dig a little bit deeper around the impact. Kurt, what got you? You are so humble, because when I first had you on, I asked you, what's your affiliation and what's the title? And he simply wrote back and said, mental health advocate. And so, humbly in just that small title, but means a lot just because how you come off. I thought it was going to be something different. But what got you on that path? Had a chance to look at your resume, see you have, a certification in coaching and mental health. I don't remember the exact thing, but what got you on the path, sir? And you've been transparent on social media about where you were, some years ago. I seen a picture with you in the club chilling. And so what got you in that? What made you drop out of the things that Carlos referred to and you referred to previously?
I think because I think it's a combination of things. I'm a first generation. My people come from Haiti. Growing up in certain areas, going to 4 different high schools, going to 5 different colleges, but couldn't graduate. I think it's a combination of things. But one thing that always sticks out to me is I remember an individual. His dream was to be a pilot, and he was talking day in and day out about being a pilot. I met another individual who was so excited about the idea of being a professor, and he had such a love of teaching and reading and writing. I met a woman who had this huge lofty dream of just being in politics one day, and she felt like she could really change the community. But all those individuals did not become what they thought that idea. They did not chase that idea due to fear, due to doubt, due to anxiety, due to imposter syndrome, due to pre-programming. They were limited. Their lifestyle was limited just due to a thought process or belief system, like Carlos said, due to a belief system. What killed me is that these people I'm talking about are my family members. So now I'm being raised over this idea that my potential is already limited. And I saw how it affected my life and my family's life, like my cousins, my peers. because now we then believe our lifestyle might be limited in some way, shape, or form, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, because kids can only model the behaviors that they see around them. Because I could not believe. So when I first started over this idea of let me first be a speaker, motivational speaker, what do you think my parents said? What do you think my family said? Kurt, you're crazy. You can't make money through talking. What the hell do you mean? But the thing is that what we never talked about is chasing a strength, like a talent, and cultivating that talent. I am a firm believer that there's only one lane I'm meant to go in. I'm meant to be an expert in one specific area. I'm not trying to be an expert in all areas. I'm only meant to be a public speaker about mental health and emotional intelligence. I'm not looking to do anything left. I'm not necessarily looking to do anything right. I just want to be an expert in this area. But I see so many people, because of a limited thought process, they are now they're chasing another person's dream and allowing their dream to become their reality, or they help build up someone else's thought process of what life is supposed to look like. Because I know a lot of people right now in our community are rapping they're rapping their ass off right now, but they're probably meant to be a police officer. They're rapping their ass off, but they're probably meant to be a judge or a lawyer. They're saying they're trying to write their rhymes and they suck at it, but they're probably meant to be a podcaster. And that's okay, but no one taught us to chase this true passion and talent and God-given strength that we was like coded within us. We're not taught that. We're not. And I've been the one that I thought I was supposed to be a rapper. I thought I was supposed to be a drug dealer. I thought I was supposed to be an athlete because I'm tall. I chased all of them. And what happened? A whole bunch of wasted time and energy. And I'm like 1 second away from being in prison. So many different times. We all have that story. I'm 1 second away from being in prison. But this is the story of so many people in my community. They're 1 second away from being in prison, or they're in prison due to chasing somebody else's dream and ideology of life. So that's some of the many things that led me into this path and saying, you know what, let me just chase this and see what happens.
Carlos, I saw you. I'm going to give you a chance because I know the professor there. I saw him writing a couple of notes. So respond to that, and then I'm going to throw something else to you, Carlos.
I'm just taking notes because, like I said, I can learn. You know what I'm saying? I pay attention to Kurt. But he two words I wrote down. And he talked about was emotional maturity, and what struck me when he said that, I had to hold in my smile for a minute. Is that I hear you talking about your lane, Kurt, but what I really hear Kurt talking about is him freeing his community. I really hear him. Like the idea of modeling critical thinking, the idea of modeling emotional maturity and emotional intelligence, it allows each individual a freedom. That's, and that's what I mean when I was talking about self-control. Now, once you understand yourself, you knock down all those walls, and you're able to go in the direction that your heart desires, not necessarily that your family has told you to go, or that your friends and peers tell you to go. And that, to me, is true freedom. I've never felt more free than when I was living my passion, when I was doing the work that was helping heal myself and helping the community at the same time. And I'm also smiling because I see the brothers that are chiming in these comments, and I'm thinking about how we collaborate while we're under attack. I think about the power of fellowship, right? I think about how Black men could really use more fellowship. And the geek in me is thinking about like sci-fi movies. When you're being attacked from all sides, there's a fighting stance that you take. And that's all the brothers stand back to back in a circle, so that you're facing, everybody's covering all bases. And I'm hoping that we can continue in Boston and beyond to start to stand back to back and shoulder to shoulder, so that we can address all these different things, because we're not experts in everything. Like Kurt said, some of us have different experiences and can speak to different crowds and constituencies. But back to back in fellowship, man, it's so powerful, whether from a mental health perspective, whether from a fighting stance. You name it, that's where we need to be. So I was just taking notes to make sure that I can reflect back on these conversations and figure out my next chess moves and who I need to work with. And I'm overdue with working with Kurt because he's reached out to me and we've talked in the past, and I want to make sure that I'm fulfilling those responsibilities as well.
Definitely, Carlos. And I want to move us into sort of, for lack of a better word, solution based. And so, Carlos, you told us a little bit what got you on the road. Shout out to Miss Henriquez, who was your first initial therapist. But the actual therapy, sir, what was it like? Let's just name, because I've heard you say before, it's almost like dating. And so let's keep it to, if you could talk to the brother right now that's watching and they're considering picking up the phone, going on the website, what would you say to them about taking that first step?
So this is something I like doing. I encourage brothers to call me or hit me up one-on-one, and so we can have this conversation in a comfortable setting. I've visited multiple therapists before I found one that worked for me. That's why I liken it to dating. Sometimes, you can go on a date. The first date is good. The second date is good. The third is like, nah, we're not really clicking. And people have different comfort zones, and therapists have different skill sets. So I want to say, before I even got to therapy with a licensed therapist, where I actually started my mental health, I think, in therapeutic work, was in fellowship at Morning Star Baptist Church. And it wasn't just the church that did it. It was actually a group in the basement that was led by Brother Donald Osgood, Sr., who basically just put men in a room and made it a safe space. And I'm in a room as a 30-year-old something with men that are 40, 50, 60. And like Kurt says, instead of being alone, I'm starting to hear my story 20 years in advance or 20 years behind. And it let me know that I was not isolated. I was not alone. It gave me more strength that this is something that I can get through if I'm feeling the same way. Other men have felt the same way. Other men have dealt with this. So that was a good start for me. And then as I got more comfortable and I wanted some one-on-one time, I started visiting different therapists. I had met Mass Health, and Mass Health covers some mental health services. If you have a private provider, you can call them and find it out. And I would just take the time. I would invest in myself. Let me go sit with this person 3 or 4 times. Let's see what their style is. Some people are very clinical, and they're very much talking about the science of depression and mental health. And for some people that works. For me, it didn't. It wasn't until I found someone that was more conversational and really kind of just challenged me to look at myself that it became a good relationship where I could go in, I could talk about what was stressing me. And it wasn't really kind of telling me what to think or what to feel. It was really just asking me in a way that was impartial. Like, there was no bias. There's no friend trying to maintain a friendship and trying to be a good friend to me. It was someone asking me a tough questions like, do you know how to focus? Do you know how to tap into your feelings without your brain coming involved? So, and I didn't, as much as I considered myself a thinker, I couldn't still my mind long enough to actually tap into the present. I'm always living in the future or living in the past, which was either creating fears in me or creating regret and pain from the past, right? So I had to learn drills. I had to learn how to sit on my hands and close my eyes and take a deep breath. I had to learn breathing, something I do every day, all day, but I had to learn that this is a process that I can control and not just leave it up to my brain. I had to learn to figure out, okay, I can still myself by using my 5 senses. What do I hear right now? What do I smell right now? What do I feel right now? And then understand how that would ground me in the moment. So it basically gave me tools. Once I found the right therapist and stayed at it with that commitment to myself, I started to get tools on how to control myself, how to control my emotions, how to process my emotions, how to do it in a healthy way, besides what I had learned, besides rolling up and lighting up a blunt, besides going to, tapping that Henny bottle 3 times with the homies and complaining about life. Like, those things are fellowship, but they're not always healthy fellowship. So I had to start learning better tools that were going to advance me. And then once I did, it became important for me to share the benefit of that so that others that were looking for those same things could access it. So it's an ongoing process. And sometimes I fall away from it. Sometimes I get back to it. But it's something that I really believe in because I've seen the benefit in my own life and those of others. I recommend it to everybody to at least try it.
So what I'm going to ask you simply, I heard that strength, some things that I may say today may be in the conditioning, and the language may reflect my conditioning and culture, but there is this standard that we're to live up to around strength and things like that. So in that sort of vein, do you view your process there as a new strength added to you as a man?
Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I'm gonna come back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and look at him. He was ready to go.
Yeah.
Kurt, based on what Carlos just said, and I know you have some tools, how do brothers begin to drop out? There's the therapy piece, there's the mindset, but how do brothers, and I'm going to ask you the same question, dudes that'll get tagged or aunties sit a brother down or nephew and to listen to this, if you had the opportunity to speak to them right now, what would be your advice to them?
No, I think I typically say this, and I always love to say this anytime I'm asked a question like this or something similar. I want it to be known, whatever I say may work for you, may not. everyone's journey in terms of their mental and spiritual and emotional growth is going to look different. It's going to look different. Carlos mentioned he sat down with a therapist and he had to do with that dating process. Sometimes the science works. You realize conversational work. I realized when I learned a little bit more about the scientific breakdown on how the brain works and the brain as a body part, I realized that that was a huge eye opener for me. You get what I'm saying? But once again, my path and Carlos' path, we're still growing, even though we're taking a little bit different ways to go about it. So like I said, anything that I say, Carlos says, just know there are tips, but it's not the end all be all. It's not that once you fit all mentality. One thing I have learned, at least just based off my experience, that mental health without spiritual development does not lead you anywhere. I am a huge advocate, and when you realize, and whatever your deity is, I'm not sitting here preaching, I'm not doing anything of that. But when you realize you're more of a spiritual being having a human experience versus a human being having a spiritual experience, life changes. When you realize that you are more than your memories, there is meaning behind your experiences. When you realize that there is a bigger picture and you're not alone, whatever way, shape, or form, life starts to change. I know there's one practice of mental health they call logotherapy, and that's just finding the meaning finding the meaning and purpose of your journey. Just realizing that even though I have these experiences, even though I have that trauma, it was for my better. Life is not happening to me, it's happening for me. When you can break down and have that belief system and realize that, I'm serious, things start to change. At least for me and what I have seen in my experiences, things start to change. When you
can I ask you a question? Because I know I feel that somebody's out there. What would you say to somebody? Yo, that's bull. He's talking all that moves you. What's the term, Carlos? They used to use. I don't know. Not bullshit, but we can use that too. I just felt that a little bit, sir. So what would you say to someone that's listening right now, that's on the cusp of getting ready to make a decision, either good or bad? What would you say to that's not my? And you kept it real to individual experience. But if that was a response, somebody raised their hand and been like, "Yo, that's bullshit." How would you respond to that?
I would ask them, who do they look? I would ask them, anyone that we look up to, anyone that's revered in society as a leader, or people in the history books, whoever you want to look up, even from musicians and mentor, everyone talks about finding some mission in life. They always talked about this. They always had some type of mission or journey. And my question is, what is yours? And it's okay if you don't have that answer. It's okay if that answer changes multiple times. But I do understand just that terminology, seek and you shall find. You get what I'm saying? I do believe in that terminology, that at least if you're on that path of looking to see what life means for you, why are you born in this era, in this time period? There's a reason why I was born in the 1980s and not the 1880s. Thank God for it. But you get what I'm saying? There's something I'm meant to achieve within this time period of life. There's someone I'm meant to touch. There's someone I'm meant to affect. I don't know who it is. That's why I hate that word purpose. I hate it because I feel like I have no clue what my purpose is. I will never know what my purpose could have been. Just donating $10 to someone who's homeless on the street. I don't necessarily know, but that's not my position in life. You get what I'm saying? My position in life is to make sure every day I live it out to the fullest. Every day that I'm making sure I am better today than I was yesterday, so my tomorrows can be thankful of that. You get what I'm saying? To challenge my thought process, my ideologies. So someone who's like, that might be bull, or what do I do? I would just challenge them to even something as simple as picking up a book. Something as simple as, for me, my first mentor was YouTube. Go on YouTube and researching different things. But are you willing to seek? Are you willing to go on that journey? Are you willing to say, know what? Let me try to figure out what this is going on. Let me try to figure out, why am I handling what I'm handling? Maybe I have to sit down with a therapist. For me, therapists didn't necessarily work. I liked coaches. Let me sit down with the coach. You get what I'm saying? I think the one last thing I'll say about therapy, which I always want to say, is that please be mindful, because at times when you open up certain emotional doors, and if in that session you can't close them, you're left with the baggage, right? You're left with that 2 to 3 week time period of you sitting down with certain emotions and the ramification of the consequences of certain triggers that are being tapped into. And you don't necessarily, if you're not emotionally strong enough to close them up or understand it, it could leave you in a worse position. That's why I always say finding someone to look up to instead of look around. Like Carlos was saying, you and your boy sitting down, that's just looking around at your peers instead of looking up to like someone as a mentor or someone that you could call a big homie and something like that. It does make a difference.
So Carlos was right again, and I see his face. And so thank you, because I was getting ready to say the word purpose. And so I want to talk to you about that offline later, because I like your perspective on that. Yeah. Carlos, I tried to throw this, extract this a few minutes ago, and I didn't want to come right out and say it, but sometimes brothers view this type of work that we need to do as being soft, and it's not a priority. As long as I'm good and you know, I'm bringing money home and I'm bagging mad chicks and you know, a lot of stuff that I said before. Understand the context of some of the words I'm using. I just want to ask you to respond to the fact to what somebody say that's some punk shit. Addressing
I would call it out as bullshit, and here's why. Because we all know as black men, we have those feelings of bravado. You know, with that programming, you know, we're tough. I bagged this many women at the club tonight, and you know, dudes don't mess with me. You know, we've had all those feelings. But we also know that in those quiet moments when it's just us, whether it's in a cell, whether it's in your bed, whether it's on someone's couch because you don't have a place to stay, you know those moments as well. And you know those moments are lonely, and you know those moments have you searching for that perspective that Kurt was talking about. Why is this happening to me? And so searching out the answer to that can change your perspective of whether life is happening to you or whether you're experiencing life. And your perspective on how you see yourself has a lot to do. So it's easy to say, nah, that's soft. When you asked me before, I got excited about, I don't think there's anything more powerful than self-control. How can anything be more powerful than me being able to control? So when Kurt, like, I'm a super geek, and I'm proud to admit it. So when Kurt starts talking about exploring the brain, how the brain works, like, believe I do that work too. Like, you know, there's parts of the brain that just automatically work like a computer, and you don't have no, you know, you're watching a movie and your heart rate speeds up because you don't know that your brain, because of the music that they're playing, is changing your heartbeat. And that happens in life. Adrenaline is dumping into your system because of a past trauma. These things are happening every day when you drive, when you get road rage, when you're confronted with an argument. You know, how you used to argue with your mother might be how dictate how you argue with your friends. Until you know what makes you do the things you do, you can't control it. I want complete control over myself. That is the most powerful thing I can think of in the world. So if you want to call it soft, I'll debate you all day. If you show me something more powerful than being able to control every facet of yourself from breathing, I practice that thing during a movie. Come on, they change the music. I tell myself, nah, this music don't control me. Watch me control my breathing for the next 5 minutes and take control over it. Like, that's the level of exercise I want it minute by minute, day by day. And I still got a long way to go because I got to unprogram almost 45 years of learning that I was unconscious about it. So now that I'm conscious of it, it doesn't mean that I got it solved. It just means that I have to now I'm responsible for the work now that I'm aware of what I've been through and how this affects me. That's how I would challenge it, because we all know the tough guy part. We've learned it. We watch it on TV. We see it in our movies. We've heard it. Men in our community do it. Men in our family do it. Show me the self-control of a man that knows himself, that is confident in himself, and ask them around him. People gravitate to that kind of energy because we all want it. Whether subconsciously or consciously, we all want control over ourselves. Nobody wants to be kind of just a passenger. We all like to drive, you know what I'm saying? And you get to decide whether you're going to be a passenger on this thing of life or whether you're going to get behind the wheel and drive your own vehicle.
So based on what Carlos said, Kurt, I'm going to kind of try to make it sort of simple that addressing our mental wellness is some good shit. And it's so weird how we're programmed. I was getting ready to say the term makes us more, you know, of a man. You know what I'm saying? We even have to start, you know, what is that? We're really looking at the root of what that means, but you know the context behind that statement. And so would you agree that the work is facing that challenge is oh God, Carlos, what's another term to use that's not so male?
I mean, it's holistic, right? We got men can have whether you call it feminine energy or balance, like we have a full range of emotions. You have men are sad, men feel lonely, men get scared. But to not be able to express those things or let yourself feel those things means you're not really being your full authentic self. Why do we, because of our gender?
Hold on. From a street perspective, you're fronting then? You're out here fronting?
Yeah.
They shot somebody or do something or got good product, whatever you got. But truth be told, behind closed doors, you fronting.
Listen, talk to a brother that's been incarcerated. You think men aren't crying in jail? You think men aren't crying themselves to sleep at night? You think they're not looking for their God and Savior in those cells when it gets quiet? You think they're not doing it when they're alone? You think these street dudes hustle all day and go home and just pop a bottle and sparklers? Nah, we're using drugs and alcohol to suppress those feelings because it's hard to face those feelings of loneliness, especially if you haven't faced them your whole life. Yeah.
Kurt, go ahead, because I seen you rocking again. Based on the last 2 minutes, go ahead, sir.
Man, I like I said, I love this conversation, right? And Carlos is bringing up so many great and amazing points. And I really think it does go back to us taking more ownership. It's just ownership and owning our culture. I feel like there's so many parts of our culture that we just don't own. So there's a narrative that's being portrayed out there. There's a narrative that's being marketed out there that we don't necessarily align with, but because we don't own parts of our culture, we're just listening to it. We're seeing the younger generation be affected by it. We were affected by it. We're seeing the older generation be affected by it. I think we need to own our culture. We need to get back to that ownership. That's why I'm really big on this idea of us, once again, us being in positions of power. I know certain things I changed. Like I saw my man on here, Sean Brown. I love that. I love that guy to death. Why? Because he would, because of the position he's in, he was able to sit me down multiple times and just provide me feedback on how to grow as a human being. And then he's like, "No, what? Once you talk to my kids out in band." Like, what? He's like, "Oh, yo, why don't you sit down and talk to them? Let me just place you in a quick position real quick and talk to them because I like what you have to say." If it wasn't for him, but it would not have happened if he wasn't in that position. You get what I'm saying? Now, because he's in that position, he can now connect with other people outside. And he's like, "Know what, Kurt, you could do this," or "Know what, let me place you in that position." I worked with a couple people on this team, Jameson Collin, like he's amazing. Like there's so many great people he was able to put in great positions because he took up that responsibility to be like, "Know what, let me see how I can grow within my career. Let me see how I could grow within this." And I feel as though, like, would I be here right now if it wasn't for you taking up on the position, be like, "Let me have a podcast. Let me outreach to Kurt. Let me sit there and consistently talk about these issues. Let me consistently be a voice within the community. Let me consistently challenge the status quo." I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. You get what I'm saying? And we can all say that. But now my question is, what role are you playing? Because I feel like there's a specific role that we all have. There's a specific role that position that we all can play if we all just know our part and play our part. Carlos talking about guys in jail. That's why I kind of go back to the spirituality. Guys get real spiritual when they get shot.
Oh, I thought you was going to say in jail, not when shot, but I used to hear the term jailhouse religion. I used to hear that back in the day. Go ahead, Kurt.
No, it's a fact. Guys get real spiritual when they get shot. They get real spiritual when they get stabbed up, or they get real spiritual when they're alone and they miss certain funerals because of family members that died and they can't come home. You get what I'm saying? They start questioning, or they start trying to think of different things. So this idea of what I just really want to hone in is like, you have a role to play in your life. Regardless if you play it or you don't play it, it's going to impact people around you. It's going to, regardless if you play or you don't play, it's going to have an impact. Because my mom didn't take up on her own mental health journey, because my dad didn't, it affected my life. It did. The Bible.
So from a street standpoint, because I want to draw these points out. Dudes talk about being in the game and whatnot. So what you just said was, you know, sometimes from vax to other stuff, you know, dudes like, "I'm not letting the system control me." So are you asserting to some extent, if you're not proactive in trying to control your role, you're not really, you're a sucker to the game?
You're a passenger.
You're know what it is? Know what I hate about this shit? Excuse me, I don't know if I can swear.
You good.
No, I hate about this because I'm tired of a community being just reactive. We are the best. We react amazing. It's amazing that we're great at reacting at shit. When shit hits the fan, we always got something to say. We always got something to say. We always got something to do. We always have a reaction action. Yeah, we felt some type of way. We have something like, no, let's march now. Like, no, that shit makes no sense. Where's the pro? That's why I talked to you the other day about these nonprofits. They blow my mind, these nonprofits, right? Where is the production? Where is us being proactive in the community? That's why I thought the roles and positions of these nonprofits were. I thought you're supposed to take on certain missions and purposes.
Kurt, because you got two folks on here that have been saying something. Kurt, you will have to pull Carlos and I in. That's where you will become the mentor. But go ahead.
No, my fault. But that's why I thought these certain roles of certain nonprofits were supposed to be in terms of being proactive and making sure certain things don't get in line. I actually met a guy at your show, and he was very, I forgot the young man's name, but he shared with me his story in regards to how he did 20 years, and he did 20 years. He came home and he has this nonprofit trying to help out kids, but he's struggling because he can't get enough kids in the program, or he can't go into the school systems because they're just looking at his criminal history. And they don't realize that he's probably the perfect individual to talk to these kids. He's probably the perfect mentor. He did 20 plus years and he came home. So he has a real life experience, not book experience. He has real life experience that he can recall and draw upon, that's going to be able to have a relation between the kids and them. Like, oh my gosh, he might be the consequences of my action if I don't shape it up. We're not utilizing our community. We're not being proactive enough. I mean, I'll calm down. I feel like I just
no. You're good because you got both of us started. The point I'm trying to make here, and I'm not saying it despairingly, but I'm listening to both of these men talk, and I'm familiar with a lot of the stereotypes that are bogged down on us to be rough, to do this, to be number one in the game, to lock the block down, to get as many chicks, whatever. And again, understand context of some terms I'm using here. But I'm trying to help brothers that may listen to this. Really sit and realize, like, this is some hard work, and you've faced and accomplished other challenge and setting other goals, and like, this needs to be a goal, because if and Carlos, we're getting ready to go, at this point, what happens if we don't address and we don't make this work a priority? You've talked about it could lead to incarceration. On the good end, it could make you, how can I frame it? Well, we're having a real conversation. It could make you more popular, with your preferred partner type, because you're addressing your mental, staying mentally well. And so, Carlos, as we get ready to get towards wrapping up and closing statements, what is the negative impact if you don't excuse the expression, if you don't man up and do the work?
I mean, I think you run the risk of, and it's different for everybody, but I think you run the risk of not being in control of your life. I think you run the risk of, if you don't do the work in your community, if you don't do the self work, you don't control your life. If you don't do the community work, then your neighbor, you're only as healthy as your neighbor is, and your community will suffer. I mean, these are the things that pushed me into what I felt was a leadership role, because I knew no matter what I was going through, I'm going through the same thing my neighbor's going through. I can't be better off than my neighbor. Like, we do have this disconnect, and we do have our individual selves, but at the same time, we also have a connectivity to everyone and everything around us, right? There's no escaping that. I mean, unless you're going to go up to the mountains and live alone, there's no escaping it. So, we know, and actually, I think the answer is right in front of us. We know the risk of not doing the work. We've seen each generation of us repeating the work of our fathers and the work of their fathers and the work of their fathers and mothers and grandmothers and so on. We already know the risk of not doing something different, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. We've been doing that. And I get it. We're in survival mode. I get it. But to quote one of my favorite poets, I'm not trying to survive. I'm trying to live it to the limit and live it alive. You know what I mean? I want us to do better. I want us to thrive, not just survive. And so to move from that survival mode into a thriving mode, we're going to have to do some things different. We're going to have to do some things that make us uncomfortable. We're going to have to do some things that we've never done before and be okay with it. And the definition of courage is not to be without fear. It's to be able to face the fear and do that shit anyway.
Can you say that again for the people in the back and slowly?
The definition of courage is not to be without fear, but to face your fear and do what you're scared of anyway. And we're going to have to start doing more of that, stepping outside of our comfort zone if we wish to have a different result. We might have to give up our standing in society. We might have to have beef with people in our own family. We might have to disagree with people that make us feel comfortable and stroke our ego. We might have to do things that we're not used to doing. We might have to step away from that church, step away from that nonprofit. We might have to step away from things that have been kind of pillars in our life, because you might realize that they're not as healthy and supportive in terms of your growth as you thought they were. But until you understand how you work, you can't affect all those systems to do that.
Step away from a relationship too, if there's red flags?
Relationships, whether it's a romantic one, whether it's
specifically romantic
one, but even familial or platonic. Some of those relationships, the people that are encouraging you to stay intoxicated, the people that don't encourage you to face your truths, the people that don't encourage you, period, to do anything, step away from them. The people that seek to control you, you know what I mean? Like we have to do something different if you want something different. And that's an individual journey for each person. But once we do that, that journey gets easier if you find people of like mind and like spirit that have that same energy and desire to move in that direction. And that's why I talked about fellowship first, even before. And I like Kurt saying that it's individual for each person. Fellowship is something that we all know and are familiar with. Whether it's not all good fellowship. Sometimes we're in bad fellowship, but checking your circle, making sure that, I always told myself that I like, in some circles, I'm the smartest person in my circle, but I made it a point to be in circles where I'm not the smartest person in my circle, because I can't grow if I'm the smartest person in my circle. I can be a leader, but I can't be a good leader until I learn how to be a good follower. There's a yin and a yang to this. And unless you understand the full circle of it and the counterbalance, you end up being reactive. And like Kurt said, it's easy to react. That's just a chemical reaction that your brain does. Something stimulates you and boom, you have a reaction to it. It's a lot harder to be proactive, to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to take control of this thing in my life. And that means I need to do step A, B, or C. I'm going to interrupt this process by doing, 1, 2, or 3. Those things take a little bit more work. And those are the things that I encourage people to start doing for themselves and then doing for their community. Otherwise, we stay stuck in this generation after generation after generation.
It becomes cyclical. Carlos, Kurt, you're coming next. Carlos, I'm going to ask you, as we prepare to wrap up, if we know that this holiday season with the 3 people that have transitioned lately in interesting circumstances, one, we don't know. I'm going to ask you just to be prepared, just to speak to the community about just grieving and acknowledging it, and just some tools, and I'll compliment you there as well. But Kurt, if you could just speak to a couple of real next steps, and kind of on the line what I asked Carlos to do too. There's a lot getting ready. There's a lot hitting our community. And within the spirit of the holiday, what would you say to folks? And I'm sure you're familiar with the term around self-medication and things like that. What are some healthier ways or mindsets that folk can acknowledge what they're feeling and be real, but just some different things that they could take away from this conversation to kind of get them on a road to not going into unhealthy fellowship, Carlos, that you said?
Yeah. I think what Carlos said was gold, to be honest. Like, he said so many great things in regards to fellowship, because fellowship is in alignment with your environment. A good seed can't grow in a bad soil. And that's what we see. We have a lot of great potential, great talent, and it's not growing in our environment. One thing I feel very strongly we don't talk enough of, what I wish Black men learn how to do, is to have more platonic relationships. We don't know how to have platonic relationships. I feel very strongly on this shit. Like, I guarantee we would have 10 times more millionaires, more entrepreneurs, more individuals achieving different dreams, goals, and aspiration if they just knew how to have platonic relationships. We sexualize everything in our community. And when we sexualize it, and when you're talking about from a mindset that's emotionally immature, we're just damaging others. And it's just a cycle. I mean, I grew up with the ideology that having girls was more of a statistical event versus a result, or of being intimate, or an expression of love. You get what I'm saying? I didn't learn that till my late 20s and 30s. Like, oh my gosh, sex is actually aligned with love. Like, sex is not an activity. You get what I mean? But I guarantee you that there's some young kid, the majority of young kids right now, they're experiencing it as more of an activity. I guarantee you they experience it more as an exercise versus the expression of love. And and then what happens is now we're growing up and we're trying to now learn how to love ourselves while learning how to love others. And that's not happening. What's in us is going to come out of us. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of self-hate. There's a lot of self-anger. There's a lot of self-regret that's within us. And we are just demonstrating it in our relationships. And then we have kids, and the kids are growing up under this atmosphere. Like, before you can learn how to love others, obviously you have to learn how to love yourself. But why aren't we learning how to just cultivate a platonic relationship? Just learning how to have a conversation, learning how to just be there for someone, learning how to care for someone and not have expectations that means it's going to lead to your clothes and my clothes coming off. Like, what? How many guys? I guarantee you, if you take a general consensus of guys and be like, how many platonic woman relationships do you have? They probably can count only one or two fingers. Now, I'm not even going to say hands. In comparison to having relationships with women, and in the back of their head, because I know guys and I know them real well because I'm a guy. At the end of your head, you have some type of expectations or some type of hope, some type of desire, or some type of, I'm
gonna hit that. I'll say it. Go ahead. Sorry.
You get what I'm saying? Like, so I really would love for men to learn how to develop platonic relationships, because in that journey, you can learn how to love yourself. You can learn how to care for yourself. You can learn more about yourself. We don't even know ourselves. We don't even know ourselves. Forget that. We don't even have self-knowledge about who we are, our wants, our goals, our desires, because that consistently change. That's why they say the brain emotionally, men tend to develop in a later age. We tend to develop emotionally at the age, I believe it was like 29 or 28 or 29 in comparison to women that develop at like 22 or 23. Like, emotionally, we're just not even developed. And we don't even sit down with our shit to even understand our shit, to understand who we are, and then choose if that's who we want to be. We don't even do that. And we're just destructing, and we're just leaving wreckage in our whole community. That's why, once again, 20% of Black men, in comparison to white counterparts, we're more likely to have a mental health issue because we don't sit with our stuff. We're self-destructing emotionally. We're self-destructing mentally. The saddest thing, I remember Les Brown said, the saddest thing in life is for a man to die at 25, but he doesn't get buried until he's 65. One of the best quotes I ever heard. And that's factual right now in Mattapan, Roxbury, JP, Hyde Park, you name it. There's a whole bunch of dead bodies walking around in our communities because they don't want to wake the hell up. They don't want to sit down with themselves. They don't want to learn with themselves. They don't want to develop platonic relationships, and they're sitting there leaving dead bodies all around them, emotionally and physically. Shit makes no sense.
And when you say that, and this is not a pushback, but Carlos helped me with that word since a few years ago when we were talking about violence. For those that are in it, I'm sure you'd agree, they're trying to, I'm not giving an excuse, but in their head, they're trying to handle it as sensibly as they can. One thing I wanted to say, as someone who's part of the LGBTQI community, we need to, and Kurt, we talked about it. We mentioned it at the Dropout, and also I think on Saturday as well, that we're using language and presumptions. Both of these men identify as heterosexual men. And so absolutely. I just want to be clear, because they're in all type of relationships, as Carlos said, addressing your shit, sorry, Ma, will definitely help you. But the platonic piece is definitely, and I can speak to that. I have some wonderful women who, well, because preference, it ain't nothing there, but they poured into me. You know what I'm saying? And so that is definitely real. So one of the things, and I'm gonna do takeaways when we wrap up. One of the first things I heard was developing platonic relationships with queens, which may induce some more ability and sense to protect them. And we didn't go too much into that. But Carlos, what would you say as we get ready to close? About some things, some mindsets that we're dealing with now and may become exacerbated or really hit us between Christmas and New Year's?
I mean, there's so much, because we have been conditioned again to put so much stock into the holiday season. And I'm not going to challenge anybody's belief about their holidays or their faith, but again, it's conditioning, right? What makes one day more powerful than another day? Like, I don't care what day you discover yourself or what day you break bread with family. Every day you do that is going to be a good day if your intentions are good. So I get the societal pressure that's put on people that ask
It's
parents to spend more money than they may have to provide for their children because they're projecting a life on their children that they're suffering from themselves, that they never healed from as children when they didn't have things for Christmas. The extra hours they have to work at a job that they don't appreciate because that's what their parents told them that you're supposed to do. Don't chase your dreams like Kurt's doing. Just go to work 9 to 5 and work 50 hours, 50 years and then retire. Like that's your job. So all these pressures mount and they continue to mount year after year. And I just challenge people to be aware of what you're feeling and sit with it and challenge it. Don't just sit with it and stare at it. Push back against it and see what happens. Like it's okay to challenge some of these beliefs. It's okay to not follow what society is telling you to do. It might make you feel uncomfortable in a minute, but I believe that the feeling of self-control you get when you start to do that feels much better than having to yield to that societal control or that societal pressure day in and day out. There's a difference, and there's stages to it, right? You become aware of it, and it's a difference between knowing it and understanding it. But before I go, I do want to, Kurt spoke to the platonic friendship part, especially for men that identify as heterosexual. My largest leaps of growth as a man have come through my platonic friendships with women. And I still at 45, I'm engaged now, so I'm not, I can limit how many friendships I have in general. But up until that, I could count on one hand how many genuinely platonic friends I've maintained. I might have had some come and go, but my leaps in growth and understanding, because when we talk about domestic violence, when we talk about women, when we talk about things, we always try to say, well, that could be your mother, that could be your sister, that could be your daughter. That to me means that you can only respect somebody that you have a direct relationship with. I want to learn how to respect myself and others as just human beings. You don't have to be my mother. You don't have to be my sister. You don't have to be my auntie. You're a human being in my community. And if I respect myself, I have to learn how to respect you as well, just because of your being, not for any other special reason. And that growth comes from dealing with people as human beings without an expectation that if I just play this friendship role for a year or two, eventually when dude slides out, I'll slide in. Just seeing, we're not trained to see women as human beings, as independent of men, human beings. We look at them as mother, we look at them as sister, we look at them as aunt, we look at them as girlfriend, wife, woman I'm sleeping with, woman that gives me pleasure. How about just a human being? When we can get to those kind of thoughts, and I'm glad you put up that post, because I think we can continue this conversation tonight.
Yes.
That is the conversation. That is what I think is the benefit of understanding our balance between men and women in our community, understanding families in our community, and changing what it looks like to develop as individuals in our community. Like Kurt said, us creating our own narrative, us defining what coming of age is. Coming of age is not the first time you have sex. We could change that. Coming of age should be when you gain a level of maturity and you know how to have a conversation and you know how to work and produce and there's different ways we can do it, and different cultures do it well. There's bar mitzvahs at certain ages in different cultures. There's African ceremonies that go back to tribal days that teach young boys how to become a man. We have to start being empowered to do for ourselves and making sure that the work we do is self-sustainable. And that's not going to come depending on a nonprofit or any other entity besides self. If we're going to be self-sustainable, we have to be self-sustainable as individuals, and then that resonates out through our families and collections of families are then called communities, and therefore, so we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of unprogramming to do for ourselves, and then hopefully, like Morpheus in the Matrix, we can start to open the door for others and at least let them see that they're in it and let them decide whether they're going to step out of it. But to quote my favorite poet again as I wrap up, we cannot heal what we don't reveal. So if we're going to keep it all inside, if we're going to act like it's not making us cry at night, and we don't ask these questions, if we're not going to share it with our young boys and young girls, the troubles and tribulations we've had, then we're just going to repeat that process. So I encourage everybody to look inside themselves, do a little bit more, become uncomfortable, and just do this work.
I just have to acknowledge someone that works to prevent it, but and often is a ridiculous, awesome resource for people that at the worst end of dealing with issues of violence and trauma is there to work with them and support them and help them navigate systems and get them in the process. And so much respect to Rusty Pendleton, who is in the room. And I respect, brother. One of these days, we need to get you up on here and hear your perspective, because he hurt me one night. My nephew had dealt with something, and I went to the hospital. We got it. He was like, James, certain percentage and things it's just not, going to change.
One of my best mentors ever right there.
Listen,
big brother. That's big bro.
We salute you, Rusty. And if Kurt, you're not familiar yet, we'll get you hooked up, bro. This used to be known as Rusty the Toe Jammer back in the day, but Carlos and I are telling our age. Gentlemen,
you said it. I didn't say nothing about that.
I really want to applaud both of you. One, personally, just for the fact that I reached out and was able to get you both. And two, you both challenged me. And Kurt, I had mentioned something to you a few weeks ago about I would like to create an opportunity. Maybe it's not to be done there. Maybe, as Carlos just said, it needs to be our own. Carlos, you remember the program Boys the Men that you came to speak?
Yep.
We need to start, doing that. And I'm putting that out there in the public, because a few people have hit me up in the past couple of years. What are you doing for vacation? And I'm like, nothing. And then I'll put this out there as well to keep me and Kurt accountable. After his Dropout Summit a couple of weeks ago, I went to him and I said, based on what the young man, one of his guests, had said, that we need to create a space called the Black Room. Just that's it. Black Room. It could be around vendors, economics, mental health, and Black, whatever. But look for something around that next year where it's conversations, depending on what's going on with the virus. It may be face to face, but where we're specifically, and I'll end with this. One of the topics that came up at Kurt's conference that evening was one of the sisters got up and was like, yo, y'all doing all y'all work over there in the men's corner by yourself, and we need to do some work together, which is true. And I agree with that. But there are times where brothers, y'all have y'all spaces, and we need to have our spaces too. And then we need to be more intentional about coming together. And it's not a dating thing. Getting back to Kurt's point, I'm going to get ready to wrap up because I feel a ramble. Go ahead, Carlos.
So I just want to make I want to make one point based on what you were saying. I want to encourage people as we think about these spaces, right? I want us to be able to replicate these spaces. I don't want people to necessarily wait for someone else to create this lane for you. I do think there should be a level of study that you do in terms of if you're gonna be in a leadership role, you want to have some responsibility, you want to have some facts. So I think people should reach out to those that are already doing it, the Sean Browns, the Rusty Pendletons, the Kurt Faustons. But once you have that foundation, someone said we need daddies in the beginning of this program. We need surrogate fathers, right? I because of what's going on in our community. I watched my father do it as a track coach. I watched brothers like Domingos DeRosa and others, Mario Moore and the MBK crew. We need more of it. We need to replicate these small things. Everything doesn't have to be grand in our community. We need to have these replications over and over so that we can reach as many people that have the need as possible. Because we know what we've been through. We know we're missing men in our community, and we know that women have been carrying this load for a while. So the more of us that can step into this breach, the more of us that can step into that and take on that mantle, the better. So I just want to encourage people to think about how they create these spaces for themselves, their friends, and their family, and challenge these norms as well as we move forward.
And Carlos, I'll take that and let Kurt close out. I'll within some limit, if it needs to be in a virtual space, private, not here on Facebook, but Zoom or whatever, have the technology able to facilitate. If there's some brothers that just don't know where to start and want to get on a Zoom, there's a model where a sister had some mothers whose sons had killed other people. In their first couple of Zooms, everybody's screen was off and they just talked. And as they grew, she said she would watch each Zoom, the screens would open more and more. And it's a space now where they do the work around some hard work. And so I just want to avail that to any brothers that want to do that in a virtual space or whatever. I'm willing to work with folks to support that. Kurt, what is it that you would say in your closing remarks to I won't just say younger brothers, just brothers, period.
Yeah. I just hope we could do something after this, right?
Yes.
I hope, I know I said it last time, just to have conversation without action doesn't lead to any type of growth. I love that we're having a dialogue, which is needed because it raises awareness, it provides education, but now we have to put that education into behaviors and actions. We have to challenge our norms. Whether it was something that Carlos said by looking up a therapist, and I know that could be hard when they say like less than 5% of therapists are Black, so you might not find someone that you can relate to, but maybe it's finding a mental health coach. Maybe it's just jumping on YouTube. Maybe it's just reading a book. Maybe it's going to a church, whatever that church religion is. You get what I'm saying? Just do something, please. Just do something. Right now, when you're looking at the way our Black women are suffering, physically, emotionally, dying, facing abuse, but they're the most educated, they're the most talented, they're bringing home the most money in our communities. Like, that shit just makes no sense. How come, what bothers me is like, how come out of all demographics, how come our Black women are the only one that have to worry, well, Black men love them? Like, what? Out of all demographics, and like you said, and I love that you challenged me as well. And I got to be more aware and conscious and more educated, and individuals who are not just heterosexual as well. But how come we're the only one that are dealing with that? That's because we need to step up. So I'm challenging everybody to do something. And if you do feel as though that you're in a position of more of enlightenment or growth or education, I hope you're doing something. Get in a position of power to allow your voice to be the driver to change. Get in a position. I really believe that, whether it's in our educational systems, whether it's in our political systems, whether it's just at work, like, I am not here right now if it wasn't for certain individuals in our communities giving me a shot. Like, know what, Kurt? I believe in you. Go ahead, run with it. Whether it's certain schools they put me in, whether it's you right now on the podcast, like, we need more people that know what they're doing in powerful positions, because we have too many blind leading the blind right now. We do. I want us to own our culture again. We don't own it. I want us to own our culture, and that won't happen until we do handle our shit, and leaders and people who know what they're doing or have an idea of what they should be doing just take position of power. I want us to own our culture. We don't. It's crazy right now.
Gentlemen, I want to ensure that people that want to follow you are able to do so. So if you could put your Carlos, I know the PSA Show, you can follow Carlos at the PSA Show, THEPSA SHOW, and Kurt, you can follow him at KURT on Twitter _FAUS.
I forgot Twitter even exists. Just hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. I'll start using
his name.
2022. I forgot that even exists. I forgot about that.
By his name. And I just wanted to name a few takeaways that we took away today. The one thing that I want to name is, and I'm saying this is not attributed to my guest, the vernacular of this, but you're not a punk addressing your shit. And it needs to be addressed. If we call ourselves kings, and we are the presumed protectors of our community, and we got game and all these other innuendos that point to a whole bunch of other stuff. Kurt said something a few seconds ago, and Carlos pointed to it too, is one of the best things that you can do is practice self-control. And someone that's really strong and got a good mind and all this wokeness we got going on, this is something that we need to address, our mental health. And so I just wanted to say that. The other thing we talked about is there are tools. I just want to name a couple of things that I know about during this time of year. If you're getting to a point where you're frustrated and dealing with a lot, breathe, as Carlos talked about. Drink water. If you're in a sustained sort of incident, toxins build up in our body on top of the fact of the weed and the Patron and all of that. So you need to drink water so you can pee, and that helps. And then also just be real with yourself, and then also have platonic relationships. Again, talking about if you're heterosexual and not just going after, women as a sexual item. Carlos, did I miss anything? Kurt, did I miss anything?
I loved it.
I mean, there's so much to take away. I had to take notes.
I saw you look at the notes, and I'm like, yeah, we're probably going to debrief at some point. But
hopefully people will share this. I hope that I'm sure it'll become available for people, and you'll make it public.
Yes.
Sometimes we all can't deliver the message, so sometimes it's just sharing it so someone else that might not have the opportunity to listen to us this morning have this discussion, maybe they get the chance to do it. You know, we share so many things on social media, whether they're celebrities or superficial things. Let's start again, like Kurt said, to own our culture and share the things that are really important to us. Sit down and have a young person watch a video or talk about it, and let's just break out of that norm. I think is one of the major takeaways as well for me.
Thank both of you, and again, being I definitely will be more proactive, but I the lane that you all talked about, I've learned mine, and so I will push and support others, and offer this space, you know, to be utilized to get the work done. Absolutely. But thank all of you for tuning in today. This is a little extended. I think this is one of the longest Java with Jimmy's, but it was a much needed conversation, and we will have more. But then also look for some work coming from us, and reach out. If you need some assistance. One of the things I did want to put up at worst, because I still, all that we talked about today, if you find yourself at any time where you don't want to talk to anyone or whatever, and just want to, or you want to do it, but do it anonymously, this is what's called the Suicide Prevention Hotline. They actually take texting now. And so if at worst, there's no one that you feel that you can trust and you can talk to, the worst case scenario, that is a number that you can call. And it's not just about suicide, but you can reach out and have a text convo if you're not feeling okay. And I just wanted to name that. Thank all of you for tuning in. To you two kings, I really, really, really appreciate you. And salute to both of you, and enjoy the holiday. And I'm here if you guys need anything. I love both of you and respect both of you. I'll say one a little bit older and a mentor, and one a little bit younger. Love you, Carlos. And definitely appreciate both of you. And Carlos is doing good because he just what? Go ahead, take the shot.
I'm just saying, I was gonna say ditto. I have great love and respect for both of you, as well as all the brothers that were tuned in and the sisters that were tuned in as well. I saw a lot of people I respect name pop up in the comments, and I'm sure there's more that I didn't even get to see. So we all, like Kurt said, we all have a role to play in the community. But I love you all for what you do and how you serve others in the community.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Have a good day, and we will talk with you soon. Thank you.